Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
What do you think? So here's what I think. I think we're taking back the House! And we still have a ways to go, so just...
Hi, this is Mark Taylor-Canfield, and this is the MTC Report, and today I'm talking about the USA elections, the midterm elections that just took place. It was a big challenge to the administration of Donald Trump and the more extremist right-wing Republicans, because the Democratic Party actually took control of the House of Representatives in the United States Congress. Now, I was at Pramila Jayapal's victory celebration party at a club in Seattle called Fred's Wildlife Refuge. It's a great place, but she was celebrating the victory and also the election of several women to the United States Congress, including women of color, including Native American women. So she considered it a huge success, this election, and there was a lot of joyful celebration at the Pramila Jayapal victory party tonight, our U.S. Congresswoman from Washington State. So what does it all mean? Yes, it's a big challenge. Yes, the House of Representatives has subpoena power, and they also have appropriations power, which means that they can vote on appropriating money. So it's a very strong position if you have a majority in the House of Representatives, which is in some ways considered the lower house of the United States Congress. If it was a parliamentary system, there would be the House of Lords and the House of Commons, as in the UK. But here we have the Senate and also the House of Representatives. So Pramila Jayapal has been a forward-thinking progressive leader in Washington State and across the country in the United States Congress, taking over for Jim McDermott, one of the most progressive Congress members ever in the United States Congress. So what this means for Washington State is that the progressive movement and the movement towards a more sort of socialist, democratic socialist movement, like the Bernie crap movement with Senator Bernie Sanders, has really taken hold across the country with candidates like Alexandra, Ocasio-Cortez. Here in Washington State, in the 9th Congressional District, we have Sarah Smith, who took on 21-year incumbent Democratic Party Congressman Adam Smith, no relation. She took him on because he has accepted so much money from defense contractors. In fact, they raised a lot of money for his campaign against her this time. During the primaries, they're both Democrats, by the way. Sarah Smith, is a self-described Democratic socialist, but she is a member of the Democratic Party in Washington State. But she took on Adam Smith for his entrenchment in the defense industry. He's accepted so much money from defense contractors. And during the primary, although she was able to raise $100,000, Adam Smith was able to raise $3 million. So that's what a lot of the Democratic Socialists, the independent candidates in the Democratic Party are up against this year. So across the country, you saw some of those candidates were not quite able to win in the general election, although they did get through the primaries, which is what happened with Sarah Smith. In Washington State, the top two vote getters end up in the general election through the primary system. So it was 2 Democrats this year. She did not win her election, but she showed strong and showed that there is a major challenge to the Democratic Party in the northwestern part of the United States. There's a big progressive movement here, including Democratic Socialists and independents, trying to move the Democratic Party away from their corporatist stance. In fact, I was laughing at Newt Gingrich and tweeted about this, that when he described the Democrats as the left, I laughed because they're actually centrists. And as Greg Palast, the investigative journalist who was on the Jeff Santos Show with me tonight, covering this election, he said, the Guardian is basically mainstream and the center in the rest of the world. In the United States, they would be considered left. But, anything that's considered, slightly progressive in the United States is considered the left. Well, it's not in the rest of the world. So I just want to let everybody know that there's a very narrow-minded view in the United States in terms of the political spectrum we're dealing with here. But the Democrats were successful in regaining control of the House of Representatives, which means that they will be able to challenge Donald Trump and his neo-fascist regime. I mean, this whole idea that he wants to send 5,000 troops to the border to confront the caravan coming up from Mexico, the fact that he is so divisive in the country and been so demeaning to women and just such a crass politician has really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including a lot of young people, and especially women. Now, at Pramila Jayapal's victory party tonight in Seattle, there was a large representation of women, and she was celebrating the fact that women had been elected to the United States Congress. So there you go. In the northwestern United States, this progressive democratic socialist style movement, which started with the Bernie Sanders campaign for presidency, is considered the future of not only the Democratic Party, but of the United States itself. So transgender rights, socialized medicine, Medicare for all, free college education, progressive taxation systems, fossil fuel taxes and fees on carbon emissions. These are all Northwestern ideas, the legalization of cannabis. These are all things that marriage equality, labeling of genetically modified organisms. These are all issues that are big in the Northwest and in the Northwestern United States, but which are spreading across the country. The $15 an hour minimum wage is another example. Our Democratic Socialist City Council member here in Seattle helped spearhead that movement across the country, starting here in Seattle. So there's another progressive movement that's moved out beyond the Northwest across the country. So these are the kinds of issues that people in the Northwest care about, at least in Seattle and the Puget Sound area, which is one of the most progressive parts of the country. And people here are hoping that it will spread across the nation, as it has largely. We've seen a real movement towards Democratic Socialist candidates, either independents or members of the Democratic Socialists of America or the Socialist Alternative, in the case of Shama Sawant, or members of the Democratic Party. These are not far leftists. These are not Marxist extremists at all. This is actually where the United States is headed politically. And those folks on the right and in the Republican Party just don't get it. In fact, a lot of the corporatists in the Democratic Party don't get it yet. But they will soon. And Sarah Smith here in Washington State is one example. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is another example. Carrie Harris in Delaware was an example. They're all across the country. These are Democratic Socialists and independents and progressives who are taking on not only the Republicans, but also the Democratic Party. So get used to it, folks. This is the movement. And this movement now is going to be even stronger after the women's marches in Seattle, which were at least 100,000 people. A lot of the student walkouts against the Trump administration, this whole resistance against neo-fascism and racism and anti-immigrant policies in the United States has really, really helped organize progressives. And it's made a difference in this national election in 2018. So this is Mark Taylor-Canfield, and I'm here in Seattle reporting. After covering the election today, I did the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. I'm a regular weekly guest there every Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And it was great to hear Greg Palast talking about voter suppression in Georgia and other parts of the country. We also had some machines breaking down in Brooklyn. So there's another question, is how much of these election results can you trust? I just happen to remember so many elections where at the last moment things switched and changed, and it was really hard to believe the results. So we'll see what people think about this one. There was a lot of voter suppression going on across the country, mostly by Republicans, by the Republican Party.
go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
Volunteers and to our interns. And then there's somebody I really have to thank, because everybody always says, how do you do it? How do you ground yourself? How do you go back there? And I just want to say thank you to my husband, Steve Williams. And to my sons, Michael and Chuck, who are not with us, but they're texting me all the time. Chuck is texting me and saying, what do you think? What do you think? So here's what I think. I think we're taking back the house! So just so people understand, what's happened is we're at about 13 or 14 seats last I checked, is that right? And we need to get to 23, but we're on track to do that. So we haven't yet taken back all the seats that we need to take back, but we're on track to do that. That's why they're projecting that Democrats will take back the House. At this point, highly unlikely, but please knock on your heads, any wood you can find. I don't know, I just want to make sure that nothing goes wrong here, but highly unlikely that we won't take back the House. And when we do take back the House, we will be able to do something about the horrific things that this administration is doing on so many levels. And tax returns, the tax returns. And we're going to make sure that we address immigration. And I want to say to you that, it's been an incredible honor to represent this district. And thank you for letting me be. What's wrong? What's happening to these kids and these families? To be one of the first members at the airport after the Muslim ban, to be able to take the voice of this district and the voice of immigrants across this country. Because here's the other thing I want to thank you for. This district sent the first person of color that Democrats have ever sent to Congress. You sent me to Congress, and I want to thank you. And you know what? I'm super proud to be an immigrant. Justice. It is not something that comes easily. It is not something that comes overnight. They are counting on you to get tired and to go away and to say, okay, we took back the House, we're all done. But let me ask you, are we all done? No! No way, we're not tired. We're not giving up. We are going to continue to build. We got to take back the Senate. We got to prepare for 2020. And we want our bold progressive agenda to be the agenda of the Democratic Party in 2020. We're going to fight. We want to be able to retire with dignity, and in the end, we want to welcome people to this nation that is a truly unique experiment in the world. It is a nation of imagination. It is a nation that has had a deep moral center that has been flawed at times, but that we have always worked towards something better. And that's what we believe. We don't believe in all this other stuff. I'm not even going to say the guy's name. We don't believe in that stuff. What we believe in is something much deeper and much better, and you are a part of making that happen. So thank you for sending me back to the United States.
Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
So besides being a journalist and writer at Truth Out and a blogger at Daily Kos, I've also written at Huffington Post, the Capitol Hill Times. I'm a regular weekly guest at the Jeff Santos Show, as I mentioned before. But I'm also executive director for Democracy Watch News, which is a not-for-profit news organization, an international news organization. And one of my issues there that I cover as an editor is press freedom. So let's talk a little bit about democracy and press freedom in the United States. First of all, the United States is ranked 45th in the world in terms of press freedom on the 2018 World Press Freedom Index report by Reporters Without Borders, which is an international advocacy group for journalism. So we have a long ways to go. The United States has been slipping. It's been dropping on that ranking every year. And a lot of it has to do with corporate media consolidation, where only a few companies actually own the media in the United States, with the help of the Federal Communications Commission, which has allowed that to happen. But it also has to do with the rhetoric coming from the White House, which is that the press is the enemy of the people. Well, the press is only the enemy of the people in a very corrupt regime that has a lot to hide, okay? Attacking freedom of the press is the first thing that dictators and tyrants do. So you must be very careful in protecting freedom of the press in any democracy. It's very, very important. So we have a lot of challenges to democracy. We also have voter suppression, which Greg Palast has been reporting on, my esteemed colleague and journalist Greg Palast. You should see The Best Democracy That Money Can Buy, his film. It's mind-blowing about what happens in the United States in terms of political power. The Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court, which equates money with free speech, is a problem, of course. And that has led to the corporatization of the political process, where the person with the most money usually wins. So these are our challenges to democracy in the United States. Now, normally the United States press does not want to deal with these kinds of issues, although this last year the Boston Globe actually challenged over 400 other publications, news organizations in the country to publish editorials about press freedom. Normally that's an issue that I have been pushing, but with very little support from other journalists in the country and other news organizations. But luckily, Democracy Watch News, of course, which is whose mission is to cover pro-democracy movements around the world, is very interested in press freedom in the United States, as is Reporters Without Borders, the Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, Society of Professional Journalism. All sorts of organizations are interested in this issue, but unfortunately, it doesn't get talked about by politicians. You never hear them talk about the fact that we're ranked 45th in the world in terms of press freedom. They never talk about corporate media consolidation. I mean, maybe Bernie Sanders, but really most candidates don't. And it's one of the reasons why the United States has really been suffering in terms of, information. So there we are. There are many challenges to democracy in the United States today. It's one of the basic principles of our society that we're supposed to be a transparent, accountable, democratic nation, a democratic republic. But instead, it's become an oligarchy, as Bernie Sanders and our former president Jimmy Carter have both said, where the rich and the elite are running the electoral system, they're running the corporations, they're controlling your neighborhood. In Seattle, of course, with the mass development that's going on through companies like Amazon and Jeff Bezos, that's definitely happening. And so there's a democratic socialist pushback. And why is it democratic socialist? I don't know. I mean, there's no extreme socialist movement in the United States. There are only a few communists that I have ever heard of in the United States. So it's not like a big movement towards the left. It's just a democratic socialist movement, which means that is the group. Those are the groups of people. Those are the groups of organized political parties that are dealing with these issues of rent control, loss of affordable housing, loss of the middle class, environmental degradation, economic and environmental justice. I mean, it's the democratic socialists who seem to be addressing these issues when the corporate Democrats just don't want to do it. Largely because they're in bed with the Wall Street, financiers, just like the Republicans. So there you go. This is the trend that's happening across the country. It's a response to anti-democratic movements that have tried to control the elections and control the political parties. But democratic socialism is the trend, at least in the Pacific Northwest, and it looks like in other parts of the country. So get used to it, folks. The Democrats and the Republicans do not have a monopoly anymore on the political consciousness of the country. Neither the Republicans or the Democrats have been able to offer solutions to a lot of the major problems. Here in Seattle, we have mass homelessness. Martin Luther King Jr. County, where Seattle is located, and the city of Seattle have both declared civil emergencies due to mass homelessness. So what does that tell you about how well capitalism is working in this part of the country? And in the most progressive part of the country, we really need to address our totally regressive tax system here, where there is no state income tax. In Seattle, there's a 10% sales tax, which of course, disproportionately affects the poor and working class folks in the city. We have failed to adequately fund public education K through 12, and we have fallen down on the job on many of these issues in the Pacific Northwest. But at least there is a movement towards a more progressive style of politics, represented by our Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, our city council person, Shama Sawant in Seattle. And it looks like the Democratic Socialists and the Progressives are in the ascendancy, as they say. So this is Mark Taylor-Canfield reporting from Seattle on election night 2018, November 6th, just trying to give you an idea of what's been going on. Washington State also had Initiative 940. This is an initiative state where the people can put things on the ballot if you get enough signatures. So this one issue, 690 or 940, is about trying to rein in the police departments. And the Seattle Times reported, and in their investigative news report, that between 2004 and 2015, 213 people were killed by police in Washington State. One officer was actually charged. So this is a police reform measure. Another issue on the ballot is a carbon fee on fossil fuel emissions. That's 1631. So these are major issues in Washington State, besides the fact that the rest of the country is fighting this battle against neo-fascism and extreme right-wing politics. This is Mark Taylor-Canfield reporting from Seattle on election night 2018. And go democracy.
Says it scratches on your brow. I said my song's a baby, then maybe you're the pretty well. I tried to make you happy, but you just let me down. I tried to do my best for you, but you just slept around. I gave you all my money, but you just wanted some more. I said I love you, honey. You just went to the door. Slow me down.